sensed, I guess, this growing need within the community, as has been said, to just expand this conversation about mental health and seeing a relevance of having this conversation right now, at this point in his story, and at this point within the heart of the church as we all know it in Ottawa. And I guess to acknowledge that what you've all been called and trained to do as pastors has been altogether altered over the past 8 months, where your heart seeks to gather and unite and connect in order to bring the light of Christ to others. Right now, and for months now, you've been operating in an environment where people and the hearts you serve are isolated, they're set apart, and in many ways, they're kind of inaccessible to you because of COVID. And there's really no end in sight. And I say this not to state the obvious or to incite any sort of panic, but it's this felt sense that all is not okay in the heart of ministry and in the heart of believers. And I carry this weight with you, and I hold with you this sense of concern that it's okay to be overwhelmed, and it is okay to sit with that felt discomfort of not knowing where you're going to go next, and feeling sometimes like God might be far away, and feeling like things are just harder right now. Clinically, when we speak of seasonal affective disorder as SAD, as you might know it, people report this low mood in the winter months. And like, I'm seeing it set in earlier this year, and it's okay. It makes sense. The days are already getting shorter, and there's this kind of sense of what's going to happen as we continue to operate from our kitchen table, like from our computer screens, and managing for yourselves staff and shepherding your people all from a distance. And that can be really heavy. And so for the next few minutes here, I'm going to lay out some of the things that I think are important conversations to have surrounding mental health and what it entails, and the importance of getting the right kind of care. I want to just kind of, as you've heard, open the dialogue to the stigma that can still sit around surrounding mental health, and hold in that balance the spiritual care that you provide versus mental health care, and then look to build your resource kit for how to support good mental health. And who will speak next, they'll share more specifically of specific resources that are available. So why talk about mental health and give it a time of day? Well, just basically, according to the Canadian Mental Health Association, 1 in 5 Canadians will personally experience a mental health crisis, problem, or illness every year. And poor mental health is not necessarily caused by a specific event, and it's not a sign of mental weakness, but it can be this combination of biological, situational, and environmental factors that, when brought together, can just create like a perfect storm. And with COVID, it just even more so. And so when I speak about finding the right support for people with mental health concerns, I offer the following example. So for you, if someone from your congregation phoned you and shared that they had this, like, for example, pain in their neck, and they're just finding that it's hard to carry out day-to-day tasks because of the pain, and they're finding that their marriage is affected because they're kind of not believed that it's a thing, and the pain started small and a Tylenol managed it, but then it just kind of grew, and now the pain is just taking over and it's totally unmanageable. I would think, and I'm pretty sure, that you would say, you should probably call your doctor, or better yet, you might tell them to just go to Emerge, because just like, quite frankly, it's just beyond your scope of practice. And I can imagine that you'd offer your prayer for this person and tell them that your team would continue to pray for them, but just that importance of getting the right help for that physical pain. And so with mental health, I just ask you to transpose that with someone who calls you with symptoms of anxiety, and saying the same thing. So if someone calls and I have, my thinking's just not right. Like, I'm having these anxious thoughts and it's affecting my sleep, and I haven't slept in months. My marriage is kind of falling apart because my husband doesn't believe me. He thinks that it's all made up and it's in my head. And what started as small worries are now taking over every aspect of my life. And so as pastors, many of you are the first line of defense for people in the church. You're who they turn to when things are hard for them. And I don't even have to ask you to know that this is the echo of what people are feeling. People are finding it very hard to cope right now. And it's why keeping the conversation about mental health, like, right on the table is just so important. So when it comes to mental health and the stigma that surrounds it, there can be this kind of underlying narrative that walks alongside it. In light of the current pandemic, people are experiencing stress and poor mental health due to fear and uncertainty. They got financial stress, it's relationship strain, their kids might be home, and they're worried about their health and those that they love. And, you know, so are you. And clinically, we see that COVID has this way of exacerbating mental health concerns and the wounds that people walk with in their day-to-day life. I use the example of, you know, if 8 months ago someone had a dependency on alcohol, they might have also had a need to get up and go to work every morning. They might have had to drive their kids to school, play late night hockey. They would have been surrounded by community. And in that sense, they were able to keep their addiction in check, or so they might have thought. Or someone with low-level anxiety may have been able to distract to the point of not checking in with themselves about the nature of what's really going on. Or someone with symptoms of depression surrounded by friends and with really like all these supports in place, they're able to placate the low mood to a manageable level. But with supports gone, people are really suffering right now and symptoms are elevated. And in a sense, it's really fast-tracked mental health concerns, and people are lonely and they're scared and they're ill-equipped to manage stress. And what might have taken years to present like in this clinical sense now it's here. And so there's a lot of rain, but we'll carry on. And so just looking at when we use that word stigma of mental health, it's important to acknowledge that there is a shame unseen in mental health that is not seen in other healthcare concerns. So there is a sense that it's not okay to not be okay. But if you break your leg, you get 100 signatures on your leg. And if you have cancer, you are rallied around until you ring the bell. But you fall upon a drug addiction, or you can't get out of bed because of the dark thoughts. There can be this felt sense that you are cast aside. And to draw on this language you might have heard about being used to describe 2020, you're canceled. And I think this needs to end. This needs to end when we talk about mental health. It needs to stop within our families. It needs to stop within our communities. And it really needs to stop within the church. This kind of hush hush, like just take care of it, just deal with that. Like it's dirty or it's bad, because the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He's close to them. And it stops, I think, by acknowledging that for many, this emotional turmoil and distress are the echo of past wounds. That sometimes there was something that was beyond our control. Someone or something may have hurt us deeply in some of the most sacred ways that it alters our brain. We call this trauma. And trauma is something that requires tending to, it requires understanding, and it requires the help of a professional. It does not require further traumatization and definitely not stigma. It requires love. But that said, as Psalm 34 says, that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, I think this is really interesting because it says he's close to the brokenhearted. It doesn't say that he's going to swoop in and take it all away like magic and just kind of like throw sparkles on it and make it easy for us. It just says that he's close, that he'll be there and that he'll accompany people in their hurts and in their brokenness and in their woundedness, but the work still needs to be done. And so for me, like, and I think for everyone, the importance of in here walks therapy and the therapeutic relationship as a safe, confidential place for healing. And I guess here too, the importance of referral, of being really aware when you see someone is struggling who presents with, let's say, symptoms of anxiety or depression or obsessive compulsive disorder or addiction or mental health disorders that in themselves, without the knowledge of what it is, can present sometimes as really scary, like paranoia or schizophrenia or other mental health disorders that are real and they're serious, but they're manageable with the right care. And of course, alongside spiritual care, and there's therapy, and there's also medical doctors who can prescribe medication as needed and to provide real specific diagnoses. And to note that this is distinct and separate, but simultaneous alongside spiritual care. And I think too, it's important to note about addiction, that addiction and the use of substance or a dependency on something like pornography, or, you know, you fill in the blank what it is, as a way for a person to cope with and self-medicate something that's going on inside. And so whether it's a social anxiety, it's symptoms of depression, or simply just a way to cover up and to distract from the pain, that's why we call addiction often a concurrent disorder, because it's often used as a way for people to self-medicate. So 2 common mood disorders that people are presenting with, it's in abundance right now. And so I just kind of want to draw on them of what they look like. So the first is anxiety. So anxiety is distinct and different than fear. It's a response to an unrecognizable danger, presenting as a physical, behavioral, or psychological reaction all at once. It ranges from like a specific phobia to social anxiety, right through to full out panic disorder. And physically, it can look like sweaty palms, muscle tension, lightheadedness. Behaviorally, it might include just avoiding certain situations, trying to do things perfectly, or trying to control events. It can be downright awful for people, and it can really make life exhausting. But recovery looks at the whole person, ranging from cognitive restructuring to understanding how, like, maybe someone's past experience intersects with the present, and right through to medication if works when needed. Depression, on the other hand, looks like withdrawal. It looks like irritability, disturbed sleeping, excessive sadness and crying, and feelings of worthlessness, and recurring thoughts of death, just to name a few. What works for treatment of depression ranges from looking at maladaptive cognitive thought processes, a self-critical ego state, maybe there's shame or beliefs about oneself, and there could be just interpersonal issues that cause the depressive symptoms. And of course, there's biologically, where medication would support the healing. So said another way, anxiety is when you just care too much about something, and depression is really don't care about anything. And when you have both, which is pretty common, it's being scared and tired at the same time, wanting friends, but hating to socialize, fearing failure, but having this like just inner drive for perfection and productivity, and it can be exhausting for people. So I think at this point, it would be a disservice to not talk about suicidality in a real and practical sense. Because as a therapist, when it comes to suicide, I approach it in a really forthright way. When someone brings forward language that sounds like the door to suicide might be ajar, I will always put my foot in the door and ask direct questions. A person who is hurting will never be offended if we directly ask if suicide is their intent. Instead, they'll be seen. And asking will not put the idea in someone's head if it's not there. You can think of it like first aid training. As a lifeguard when I was younger, I was taught that if someone's bleeding, you rest, elevate, and apply direct pressure. And the same too in our conversations about suicide. It just can be as simple as, it sounds like things are really hard for you. So when you have those dark thoughts and things seem hopeless, is suicide an option? It's direct conversations, and then to get the right help immediately if there's no definitive answer to the contrary, right in the moment. There's training available. It's called assist training. It's specifically treated like a first aid course for having the important conversations surrounding suicide. And I recommend it to anyone who works with any person in any close capacity. I shared the importance of keeping your ear open to people who may be struggling, and the importance of knowing when to refer beyond yourselves to a trained professional when it comes to mental health. As just that, to ensure that everyone gets the best possible care that's needed. But I think it's important to note too, and as I know Doug will touch on later, but that importance to not leave yourself out of the equation, because as the shepherds of the people right now, I can pretty confidently say, and you're not trained to work amongst these conditions. You weren't trained to be separated from your people, and just quite simply be aware of your own mental health and what it is that's coming up for you, and where are you struggling, and to ask your own selves and to ask each other the hard questions that if you might benefit from a conversation with a mental health professional. Like, I don't have to have it all together, but neither do you. None of us do. The simple turn of phrase that you can't fill from an empty cup, it rings true here. And to not be too like cliche in terms of pandemic language, but just that importance of putting on your own mask first. And so I do want to address like this therapy stigma thing of what psychotherapy is. So psychotherapy is a talk therapy that can be done by a family doctor, a psychologist. It's just two people coming together to work to bring about change so you can enjoy a better life. And I know there's stigma, particularly with believers. Well, there's this first idea that like, shouldn't my faith be able to fix this? And the answer is no. Again, just like a broken leg, we can ask God to provide the graces to get through a tricky time with the cast, but he wants us to see a doctor. It needs to be set. In the same way, if you're having trouble with your thinking and things you just can't seem to work through on your own, some of the things that have hurt you in the past, or if you've met a roadblock in your marriage, I'm going to say he wants you to access those resources available to you and to get the help that you need to fix your troubled thinking, to process the traumatic experiences, and really just to like learn to operate in new ways. But there is a nuance as well that's important to address when it comes to psychology generally. And it goes back to Sigmund Freud, I think, as all things, all good conversations do when it comes to psychology. Freud had an attitude towards religion and spirituality that kept it at arm's length from psychological disciplines. And I think it really did a disservice because we see that clinicians at that time who were too interested in religion were viewed by their colleagues as unenlightened or even troubled. And so throughout the whole 20th century, this really limited any discussion about spirituality within the therapeutic context. And as a result, people avoided treatment and they avoided care because they just didn't want to be belittled for their faith. But I can say that while it bleeds into today, things have changed, and a healthy spirituality is totally seen as a really great resource, and like Freud's views have been shelved. And so there are many clinically aware spiritual providers in Ottawa for sure, and you'll find that at Christian Counseling Ottawa and throughout the city. That said, like therapy and counseling is confidential. It's a shared therapeutic context where like whatever's shared won't leave the room. And that's good to know for people who you pastor and for yourselves, that when thinking about how hard it must be for people and for yourselves and others to bring forward their struggles, as I was thinking about it, I thought about the woman at the well and when Jesus meets her there. In John 4, that we read that Jesus speaks to the Samaritan woman at high noon when no one will be there because she goes to be at the well because no one else will be there. But Jesus is there and he's alone with the woman, knowing that she'd come just shrouded in that pain and that shame and that guilt of what she's done. But he ensured that the disciples were gone. He was alone. It was just him. They were off like shopping, and it was just Jesus and the woman. And I don't say this to put therapists anywhere near the role of Jesus, but I say it to draw a parallel that I think by looking at ourselves and our pain and reaching out for help, we will meet Jesus in ourselves and in our own high noon and in the sacred and confidential space of counseling without the onlookers of others. And I don't think it's navel gazing to look at ourselves and to examine our own defects and the areas that we fall short alongside another person. It really is sacred ground, and it's for all people. And I'd say there's no option for anyone to opt out of doing their own work towards healing. Aware of the time, I say it again that I just can't imagine what it must be like for each of you to be shouldering the weight of what you carry right now. It's a lot. And as the first line of defense for many faithful here in Ottawa, you do really important work. And I just think generally here, it's important to talk about what supports good mental health, because we kind of talk about the negative, what it looks like, but there's practical things we can do to support ourselves, kind of looking into the future. So it's finding ways to connect with the people that we love in rich ways. And so right now it might mean having a whole bunch of car blankets in your backyard, have socially distanced visits in the cold, and bring a hot beverage. It means moving your body. It means exercising, even if you've never done it before, just strapping on a pair of shoes and to get those feel-good hormones moving. It means making sure that you don't burn out. Take a mental health day. And if you can't do that, ask yourself why. So take a day to just read a good book and cook a nice meal and kind of just take a mulligan from the day-to-day. It means eating good foods, and what we put into our bodies impacts us, but also too, what are we putting in? What are we reading? Are we able to take like a day, even like an hour off of social media, off of what's going on, just a day without the news, to just give ourselves space to breathe, kind of creating in our lives like this space of margin. And as needed, do we reach out when we need it? So I guess I leave this with you. Know your resources for yourselves and for the people that you love and that you minister to. And as mentioned, there's support that will be posted on the Respond Ottawa website. And when in doubt, I'd say refer to a mental health care professional and be a part of breaking down the stigma surrounding mental health. Checking in with ourselves too is needed. Increasing awareness, how on a day-to-day basis we can support our own mental health and that of those around us. And to just slow down in these times when things are harder as they are, and accepting that it's okay to have a bad day and to make space to honor our own needs in real practical ways. And it's okay and it's not selfish to make space for our unseen needs, because mental health, it's intricately woven into God's design for our being. And I leave you with this quote from Henry Nouwen that says, "Nobody escapes being wounded. We're all wounded people, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. The main question is not how can we hide our wounds so we don't have to be embarrassed, but how can we put our woundedness at the service of others? When our wounds cease to be a source of shame and become a source of healing, we have become wounded healers." So thank you for your time.
And Kevin, if you would unmic yourself, that would be great. And we're looking forward to hearing from you.
I think I am on mic. Everyone hear me? Thumbs up? Beauty. So thank you, Lindsay. I think after I talk, you'll think that Lindsay and I got together before this and kind of compared notes, but you know, some of what I want to talk about is right along the lines and just how important it is. And you know, as I was preparing for this Zoom meeting, getting hooked up and whatnot, I was just overwhelmed by the thought and that it's so nice to see everybody get together like this, because for so long we've had that stigma that Lindsay was talking about that's attached to mental health and addiction. And it's, you know, it must be all in God's timing, because a couple of weeks ago was Recovery Week. And the theme of Recovery Week this year was Stigma Ends With Me. And how we need to stop that stigma and the negative thinking that goes behind mental health and addiction issues. And I want to throw some numbers out at you. You know, 1 in 5 people are affected by someone with mental health or addiction issues. 1 in 5 people will have some type of mental health issue in the year coming up. 1 in 10 people are alcoholic and 1 in 8 are drug addicted. So if you put those statistics together, that's an awful lot of people. And we need to stop trying to solve this on our own, because we can't. We need to come together as a community. We need to stop operating in silos, and we need to be the body of Christ at work, because we can't do this alone. As much as we try and as how hard and how much effort we put in, we need all of us to walk this out together. And you know, I was reading an article, the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction said that we're just experiencing right now the tip of the iceberg. They called it a tsunami of mental health and addiction problems that are coming down the pipe at us. You know, this pandemic time is we've never experienced anything like this. So we don't know what the ramifications of this isolation and of the life changes and of the not being in community are going to have on us. And they say it's about a 3 to 6 month lag time. So even when we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, we're still going to have a host of issues, mental health and addiction, that we got to come together as a community and deal with. It's not going to go away. And you know, a lot of people that I talk to, especially in the leadership community, you know, one of the things they say to me is that they were never equipped to deal with addiction and mental health issues when they went to Bible college or did their Bible training or their pastoralship training, and they were too busy focused on other things and how relevant that these issues are in our congregations today. And that's another reason why we need each other. And we need each other's resources. We need each other for community, and we need each other to walk through all this. It's definitely something that is going to become more prevalent as we go along. You know, just in the province of Ontario alone, there were 200 overdoses in the month of May. That's 3 months into this pandemic. That's an increase of about 120%. That's just in the month of May. And the numbers aren't going down, they're going up. And so we need to come together as a community to you know, walk this out and bring some solutions. It's really tough, you know, as Lindsay was saying, you know, no one wakes up one day and says, I want to be an alcoholic, I want to be a drug addict, or I want to have mental health problems today. You know, these are things that come upon us, and we don't see them coming, and we don't reach out, and we don't talk about them, and then all of a sudden they're upon us. And so we have to start talking about it, and that's why this is really important, because we all can start these conversations, good, healthy conversations about what to do and what can we do, and more so in this era of COVID, you know, what can we do coming in the future? Because as I said, it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And I don't say that to fearmonger. I just know that you know, these agencies have done their work and know that there's some major issues coming our way. Even if this issue of addiction and mental health doesn't touch you personally, it touches us as a society. Our costs to society are skyrocketing every year. The average in Canada for 2018 was, for every taxpayer, it cost $750. And those are just in associated healthcare costs and associated medical costs, associated court costs. Even if it doesn't affect you personally, it affects you as a whole, as a society. And so it's another reason why we need to address this. One of the things that we can start doing is keep this conversation going. There's so much stigma attached to mental health and addictions. You know, it's like Lindsay was saying, a lot of us still have that tinge when someone says, you know, maybe they've had suicidal thoughts. And Lindsay put it so aptly that just because I have a thought doesn't mean that I want to act out. And so we need to understand and be there for people and be able to listen. There's so much trauma in our society. And one of the things that we see at Jericho that really is predominant are adverse childhood experiences. And adverse childhood experiences are you know, things that happen to us between the ages of 4 and 9, and we tend to stuff them and try to forget about them. But as we grow older, they resurface, and they predominantly come out in fear and anxiety. And so when these feelings of fear and anxiety arise, and we're living in a time of isolation, they tend to overtake. And so we end up self-medicating. A lot of times we don't have the resources available to us to reach out to and start dealing with these issues if they're affecting you personally. And so we end up self-medicating. And we can do that in many ways. It's not just drugs or booze. It can be pornography. It can be anything that gives us that ease and comfort to try to make us forget about what's going on around us and how we're feeling. I know that very personally, because I lived in fear for so many years. And I always said fear was like quicksand. The more I tried to get out of it, the more I struggled to get out of living in fear, the deeper I sank into it, because I didn't have the tools. I didn't have any tools or resources, and I did not have any community around me to help me figure out that path. And so we have to keep that in mind. One of the things that we talk about at Jericho Road is that We have a COVID-19 resource hub on our website, and it's a resource hub for everybody, not just us. It's for the whole community. And so I highly recommend that you take a look at it. And we have all types of resources, from government resources to community resources to resources at Jericho Road. We don't not only just serve the clients that we do serve, but we also serve our community. And we're more than willing to help out, to speak, to talk, to lend an ear, whatever it takes. Because, you know, like I said at the beginning, this is a community issue. It's no longer just an us or them issue. You know, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about was that it takes the body of Christ to come together to be an influencer in what's going on around us. And the more that we get together and do things like that we're doing today, the better it is for everybody, and the more important it becomes to the community around us. And because, you know, one of the things that I always like to talk about is that addiction is a spiritual disease, and we need to address the spiritual sickness, and we need to do that with community. We can't do it on our own. And it's so important that we come together as a community, especially in this time. One of the things that we don't know is what the long-term effects are going to be of COVID-19. This is uncharted territory. And so it's all more important, as I said at the beginning, that we come together as a community and start walking this out together. One of the other things that I just wanted to mention was that Jericho Road has an Insights to Addiction and Recovery presentation that if you are interested in learning more about addiction, learning more about mental health, and as Lindsay was saying about co-occurring disorders, they go hand in hand. You can just get in touch with me or with Jericho Road, and we'd be happy to sit down and talk to you, your leadership team, or even your church about addiction and mental health issues, and about what we can do to end that stigma, to start having an ease into those conversations which before seemed to paralyze us. And I can tell you this, that once you start talking, it becomes a lot easier. It's just to start those initial conversations. And we're so blessed to have Ottawa Christian Counseling as well, because, you know, as Lindsay was saying, we can have those conversations and have them in complete confidence, and know that we're talking with trusted people, and that we're all solution based. We're looking for the same way to help us with what's going on. The Government of Canada has a great portal that's on our website, and it's called Wellness Together Canada, and it points to addiction and mental health and what resources are out there in every community. They've done a really good job on it, and it's anonymous, and it's I think a really good starting point to be able to give that information to people so that they can make that first step. And just, as I said, just being able to help people to start to talk about it. Because we have a saying in AA, if we don't talk about it, we drink about it. And so we need to start these conversations, and we need the love of Christ to give us a boost in starting them. I think that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Doug?
Hi. So just following two really great talks so far, and just so appreciative for what's been shared. Some of it may get duplicated or triplicated, but sometimes we need to hear things over a couple times just to make sure it really sinks into our minds. So it's my privilege to focus in a bit more on how the church can help and some of the tools that we may have, especially for self-care as well. I recently just came across a man who was a great speaker, very well known. I hadn't heard of him, but he was very well known, booked a whole bunch of talks, and his name's Brent Ullman. He's in Toronto. And he was speaking and had no idea that he was susceptible to mental illness. and about 7 years ago had his own journey into it, and is still working through his own journey of mental illness. Has now become quite a renowned speaker. He's got great blogs on it of sharing about his mental illness and how to help. He's a believer and was speaking. So I wanted to pass on just some of the things I learned from him and his own journey. Here's a couple really practical things. First thing he said was, if you say, I'll pray for you, make sure you pray for the person. I hate to say that, but we often just say that as, good morning, how are you? I'm fine, thank you, and all that, and I'll pray for you, and we forget about it. But he said, no, pray. Actually pray for the person, and then let them know you're praying for them. Second thing that I thought was very pivotal and very important was ask them how they are doing today. Not overall, today. Just engage with them. Reach out to them. Don't fear. And I recognize there's people I know that have mental illness, and I'm afraid I don't know what to say. Reach out, engage, and just ask them how they're doing today. And thirdly, a sad part of what he said was that unfortunately, most of the people that he comes in contact with would say that the church has hurt them more than it's helped them. And so I'm glad we're addressing what we're addressing today. A friend of mine, Dr. Grant Mullen, has spoken at Solely Business, and he's a retired physician, but he's still engaged in mental health issues. He's a believer and still struggles with trying to get people to overcome the stigma of mental health. So I was listening to him today. He did a blog, and today's message was on Mental Health Day, which is more coincidental than anything else from what I gather with us choosing this day. But how neat is it that worked out, that's the focus for society today as well as us. And he went on to say today, he and his wife, Kathy, went on to say that we're comprised of body, soul, and spirit. Body is the brain, how you think. Soul is our personality affected by past, present trauma. It's part of our mind, it's part of our will, it's part of our emotions. And our mind is part of our body, which can malfunction just as our physical body can malfunction. Mental illness is a dysfunction of the mind. And he's saying that just in, I think, terms that we can relate to. So we treat the body, as Lindsay was saying, but we also need to treat the mind without any different stigma to it. If the body needs something and the mind needs something, we need to treat them both. And also being very aware that we live in a world where there's a spiritual world around us, that our spirit can be affected by the spiritual world around us. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. And they have seen in their own ministry that as you get somebody's mind at ease, as you begin to level up the medications that are needed, then they can begin to deal with the other issues, the spiritual issues, other issues that they're facing. Last night I came home and I thought I had prepared all this, and I came home and I was driving and I just said, Lord, I've missed something. I don't know exactly what it is. And I came home and a friend of mine who I don't often communicate with, he's a local physician. He actually sent me an email just when I was sitting down to prepare these notes. And I wanted to, with his permission, quote what he said. And he said he was praying for us and is praying for us right now, which is really kind of cool. But he said, I'm seeing more people, or we're seeing more people affected by mental health than by infection. Suicide attempts outnumber COVID cases. Then he goes on to say, our challenge is to follow Christ's command, to care for the widows and the orphans, to visit those who are ill or in affliction, those that are alone. He also, just in subsequent conversation, went on to say that healing, it's so essential for healing, for our health, to have interaction with people. And many people in these nursing homes, many people that are single that can't connect with other people, they don't have a way of healing because they don't have anybody to connect with. And so he's encouraging us to, as properly as we can, whether or not it's blankets outside, putting shoes on and being in the cold, to actually reach out and connect with people that we may or may not even be comfortable connecting with. My wife is from California, and so every Sunday afternoon, we join her parents' church in Orange County, and Pastor Abel's a great guy, and he was quoting last Sunday, and my wife pulled out the quote for me today. He said that in California, we're seeing more deaths from suicide than from COVID since the pandemic began. That's a startling statistic. So we look at all this, we've heard of some things that have already been said, and we can say, so what do we do? How do we help? So I wanted to be practical and just give some things that come to my mind, and I'm sure there's so many more that we could talk about, but we're just touching on so much of this in the hour we have today. One of the key areas that I see in my involvement in One Way and prior to One Way is to make sure that our own lives, as Lindsay said, our cup is full. We can't pour out of an empty cup. If we do, we burn out. And I see a lot of that because we just give and give, but we don't receive in. It's important for us to rest. It's important for us to have Sabbath. It's important for us to have times where we are nurtured without feeling selfish. It's important for us to have quiet times, disengage, have silent retreats. I'm getting more and more involved in that. And it is so life-changing and restorative for me personally. The second thing is guard your personal relationship with God. What a strange thing to say to a group of pastors and leaders. But I will tell you that many of us, we cut that out in order to serve other people, and we lose this vital source. I was reading a book, Life in the Presence of God. A friend of mine's always given me books, and even though we owned a bookstore, I hate reading. It's a struggle, but I am working my way kind of through that book there. And one of the quotes that I just read, which I thought was so appropriate for today, he's an author and speaker. He said, even the most spiritually focused activity is no substitute for God himself. And all people, pastors or not, have to nourish their personal relationship with God to prevent them from getting strained or from burning out. So on from there. As Lindsay already mentioned, and I've certainly been learning on my own journey, keep your bodies healthy. Guard your body. Food, exercise, rest, and sleep. Turn off what we need to turn off in order to look after ourselves and care for ourselves. One of the things I come across so often, especially in my time now at One Way, is I see church planters and pastors and leaders, and their identity is directly tied to the church, and that's not true. Your identity is not the same as the church. It's what you do. It's what God may have called you into, but it's not who you are. Keep them separate for your sake, for your mental health, and don't carry what you were never meant to carry. Christ said, I will build my church. Let him build it, and let us cooperate with his building in it. I've also joined and been encouraged to join have group myself. I'm part of a pastor's prayer team for a pastor that's not even in my own church, and I'm part of his prayer team, and he shares with a few of us. Honestly, we pray for him every week. So engage prayer team outside of your circle where you can be honest, and they pray for you and cover you weekly. It is a joy to pray for this pastor. I pray for a few now, and it's an absolute joy to be able to do that. I know some of you may have been taught and it's been frowned on, but we need close friends. Everybody needs close friends. And whether or not they're in the church or not, I know they can get tricky, but we need somebody other than our spouse to help carry what we're carrying. I have a few more points, almost done. But it's okay to not have the answers. I learned that from Alpha. One of the best things I learned from Alpha is I don't have to have all the answers. I can say, I don't know. What a gift. I am not the Bible answer man, and we don't have to be. None of us have to be. We don't have the answers to something we've never been through before. What a joy to be able to say, I don't know, but maybe I can refer you to somebody that might. Or join along the journey with them and help them see and find out. The last thing, and I'll put a shameless plug in for One Way, what an opportunity, what a ministry that serves. And our ministry here is to serve pastors, leaders, marketplace leaders, and it's just our joy to serve. So I wanted just to share a little bit of what I see that we offer at One Way. There are times where we just come alongside people and we listen. We meet with church planters. We pray, we serve. We pray for pastors and leaders throughout the week. We host prayer retreats, listening prayer opportunities. We host something called Leader to Leader that helps you unpack a situation that's way beyond you. We have Respond Ottawa, and what a joy that's been. And in any way, just contact us if you need help. Seek it out, no matter where it is. If it's us, CCO, Jericho Road, there's other ministries that will be on that sheet. Seek it out. We're not meant to do this on our own. We're meant to be part of community. And what a joy to have such a safe group around us of commonality, that it's in Christ that we can do this. One of the dear friends that I've known for a while, gotten to know him a little bit better, and he's also kind of a part of our extended One Way family, is my brother Sean Ketchison. Now I can't see him, so I assume he's listening in and ready to unmute and join me here. But I want Sean to actually just share a little bit of your own journey with your brother and with what you want to offer a bit, and we've just got a few minutes to do this. So Sean, thank you.
Thank you very much, Doug. allow me to say how much I respect and admire each pastor here. I can't imagine, and I pastored for 30-some years, what it's like to pastor right now. So I respect and admire each one of you so much. And if I can explain why I respect and admire you, I'll do that. My brother also is a pastor. And we've got a great relationship. And he's roughly 10 years younger than me. And this past summer, he didn't wake up. He died. And I've been trying to process since then why my brother died. So he's a pastor in the church, and he suddenly died. The cause of death was a stress-induced heart attack, which I Googled. I don't even know what that means, stress-induced heart attack. So since his death, I spent a lot of time talking to his wife. Maybe there's a marriage problem. He had a beautiful marriage with his wife, and she's a sweet lady. His grown children love and adore him. They vacation together, his adult children and the family, beautiful unit. In confidence, I share that the wife tells me she'll never have to work. No financial worries. Figure that out. As a pastor, no financial worries. He had excellent health, no health issues. So I look back on our time together since COVID started, and I'm a bit slow, but I process all the conversations we had about him and the struggle he was having trying to be a pastor in this season. It wasn't hard to be a preacher. Do your Zoom call. That's real simple to be a preacher. But if you got a pastor's heart, how do you pastor during COVID? How do you walk through life holding somebody's hand? You can't touch them. How do you shepherd the sheep when you can't be around them? And so as I've processed this for a few months, I concluded that, and I could be wrong, but it seems as if his source of stress was struggling with being a pastor in this season. His church got into some trouble, and that was an aging congregation. So they couldn't do some of the things some of the more technically advanced churches are doing. And the result is he had a heart attack in his sleep, didn't wake up, and a large, massive funeral on Zoom, where everybody talked about how wonderful he was, how great the church was, all this kind of stuff. But talking to him beforehand, I realized now he was in great pain. And I'm thankful to God I had the chance to tell him how much I loved him. And if I was in his community, I'd want to go to his church. So I don't have guilt over that stuff. But what my heart does do is want to reach out to pastors who have a pastor's heart and for whom this is a tough season. So just two quick things if I can throw out, if that's okay. A hat I wear is I'm on the board of Christian Counseling Ottawa. And Lindsay is one of our 13 psychotherapists. She's great. And we exist primarily to care for pastors. So if you're a pastor, you need to be cared for, give CCO a call. As a board member, part of my calling is to raise funds so we get free counseling to people who need it. And as a pastor for 30 years, I often shuffled people to CCO that I couldn't care for, I didn't have the equipment. The other thing is, I'm not a counselor, but I am called by God to love you, pastors. And if you want somebody to talk to, my hat with One Way Ministries, I just have a phone line. Phone. I love to listen to you, pray for you, and just be a friend. So anyways, why do I love and respect you so much? Why do I admire you? Pastoring is the most difficult thing in the world. Give me 20 minutes, I'll convince anyone why it's so difficult. That's before COVID. It's off the charts and challenge. So God bless you folks. Men and women, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much to each of our speakers. Thank you for sharing from your heart. And Lindsay, Kevin, Doug, Sean, I just don't even know what to say. That was amazing. Thank you. So Richard has a couple of just tidying up announcements. We are going to break out into prayer groups in just a minute, but just as next steps, some of you may be wondering, so where do we go from here? We've started this great conversation, but it is clearly not over. And Respond Ottawa does have a heart to, form a team, a broader team to address this. It's a big issue in our city, and God has called us to love and love well. So I don't know if there's anyone that, God has stirred something in your heart, but feel free to reach out to either Richard Long, Doug Sprunt, or myself. We'll put our emails available, and you can contact us, and we'll see what God does in our city. So Richard, I don't know if you could give us instructions.
Wow, thank you, Stephanie. Thanks to each of our speakers. That was a very full meal. Lots and lots to think about, lots to ponder for our own souls. And as Stephanie said, we realized we probably need to create a special team in the city of pastors and lay leaders who will focus on bringing the churches together in a very practical way to be ready to handle. It's already upon us, but this mental health pandemic that's hitting us right now, and I'm sure will go on for a while. So if you have a particular interest, do contact us, because we are putting together a team on that. We always, this is a regular pastor's prayer call that we've been doing since March. Yeah, it always happens at 1 o'clock, usually goes for just an hour. And one of the things we do every time is break into smaller groups to pray with one another. And though we are a full hour into this right now, and some of you may need to go, what I do want to encourage you to do is stay around for another 15 minutes or so. And at the end of 15 minutes, we'll all come, whoever's left will come back into the main Zoom room. But in a second here, Janice Davies going to split us off into small groups where you can introduce yourselves to each other and just ask each other, how can I pray for you today? Maybe it's around mental health, maybe it's something different. But let's take the time to minister to one another as we usually do every Wednesday afternoon. Thank you again for everybody that's come on the call, and thank you again to our special presenters and for all the people that made this happen today. And Janice, you can take us into our Zoom rooms.